Good morning, one and all. Let me start with a short salutation. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This topic is quite interesting. It covers quite what they call a wide field, and today's topic is talking primarily about the Dhamma path and our relationship with spiritual guides. Spiritual guides can be monastic. It means achans, sayadaws, venerables, those who have renounced. Spiritual guides could be lay people. Okay, some people may regard me as a spiritual guide, though I don't like the idea, but there are those who regard. So what is our relationship? How do we regard them? And of course, spiritual guides, by the term, a person who guides you is somebody who gives advice, teach you, share their understanding and so on. And of course, not just any guide, not a tourist guide or anything, but spiritual. In this sense, the Buddhist guide. So how do we regard them? And who is a spiritual guide? And how do we, what they call, weed out those who think they are spiritual guides, or some who are actually fake, bogus monks and stuff like that. How do we regard them? This is some of the what they call the wide scope in which we have to navigate in life. And many of us, we wander in samsara. And for those who do not know, samsara is basically what they call the cycle of birth and death. And the picture here shows the typical, what they call, journey. Some of us who are lucky are able to make. It means we are born, we grow up, we have friends, and we grow old and pass away. This is the natural order of things. But not everybody is that lucky. Some people don't get past the first frame on the left. Okay, their kids, they die. And even before that, they don't even get born. So people die. So along the way, many of our relatives, our friends, close family, we ourselves may pass on. We don't reach so-called ripe old age. So this is life as we have observed it. Whether you like it or not is besides the point. This is what we see happening. But that is not samsara. That's only one part of samsara. And in this Dhammapada verse 153, the Buddha says, through many a birth in samsara. Samsara, as defined, as I mentioned, cycle of birth and death. So many a birth. So we have been born, die, many times. So how old are we in samsara? It's incalculable. Okay, it is what I call going beyond the age of our universe, and that is a very, very, very long time. So through many a birth in samsara have I wandered in vain, seeking the builder of this house. What do you mean by this house? Of this life, of lives that we have been experiencing. Repeated birth is indeed suffering. So this is the first part. Of course, the accompanying Dhammapada 154 talks about the Buddha's victory. He found the builder of the house and he was liberated from there and so on. So these are some of the issues which we have. Now, samsara is talking about, as I mentioned, cycle of birth and death. This is a common internet poster you can find. And in the Asu Sutta, the word Asu, the Pali word, the language used by the Buddha, Asu means tears. We cry because we are sad. Sometimes we cry when we are happy. But here the Buddha says in this Asu Sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter number 15, Sutta number 3, notice I take the trouble to tell you the Sutta, Sutta meaning lecture or teaching, which you can access whether in English, in the original language of the Buddha, in Chinese, Tibetan, so many. The Pustaka Ananda, of which I'm helping to oversee, has all these resources. You can access those who prefer to hold a book. Those who don't like the whole books, they want to see on the computer screen or use your smartphone to access internet resources. All this is available on the internet. So there's no excuse anybody say, oh, yo, I don't know where to find the book. You can actually literally call up this Asu Sutta and many other Dhammapada verses and so on, right from your smartphone nowadays. Okay, so Asu Sutta says, monks or mendicants, transmigration has no known beginning. Transmigration means being born again and again and again. So rebirth or transmigration has no known beginning. Now this statement here, this sentence here, answers the age-old question. Because when people come to you, what religion are you? Oh, I'm Buddhist. Oh, okay. Another person, he's a Muslim. Another person is a Christian. So the common and favorite question of all religionists when they talk to each other and all that, hey, what does your religion believe is the beginning of the whatever lah, universe or life or whatever? Here, like in many other lectures given by the Buddha has already mentioned, transmigration has no known beginning. No first point is found of sentient beings roaming and transmigrating, shrouded by ignorance and fettered by craving. The flow of tears you have shed while roaming and transmigrating is indeed more than the water in the four oceans. Why? Assuming your tears do not evaporate over the, what they call, ongoing born again, each time we live a life, we have sadness and so on, we shed tears. So if all these tears do not evaporate and we accumulate them, it is more than the water in the four great oceans that we know of. So for a long time, you have undergone the death of a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a son, daughter, loss of relatives, loss of wealth, through illness, from being reunited with the unloved, separated from the love. The flow of tears you have shed while roaming and transmigrating is indeed more than the water in the four oceans. Okay, this is Asu Sutta. And in the same chapter, Samyutta Nikaya, chapter number 50, there are other suttas telling similar stories, but not about tears, even about blood. You've been executed, we have bled and died because of that over the incalculable times we are born and so on. So why did I show this page? Because we are wanderers in samsara. Okay, and we encounter all those things which we do not like, as these various quotes have indicated. So we want to find refuge. We want to find some way of getting rid of or ending all these wanderings in samsara, all this suffering, all this unhappiness. That's what we want. We want to be happy. So this page shows the characteristic of existence anywhere. Even the happiness, Buddhism didn't say that you do not have happiness. We have happiness, but we want our happiness to be forever. But it never happens. It comes and it goes. Even the sadness we have, it comes and it goes. Everything is changing. And so we move to this first portion. Okay, the title, the spiritual guide to and on. But this portion emphasizes the Dhamma path. The word Dhamma, the ancient word used by the Buddha, and used by many religions or philosophies coming out of the Indian, what they call, peninsula, okay, consisting of Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and further north, Tibet also lah. The word Dhamma means different things to different religions. Even Hinduism, Brahmanism, they have the word Dhamma. But here, this Dhamma path I'm referring to is the one taught by the Buddha. Okay, so Dhamma according to Hinduism is different. Dhamma according to other religions from that continent is different. Although they use, because it's language, but the definition, the contents are different. So this Dhamma path I'm referring to is the Buddha Dhamma. And the word Dhamma itself, the root word Dara, describes support. Dhamma is the natural law, okay, found in the universe. Whether it has been discovered by scientists, which we have been forced to study in schools like chemistry, biology, physics, and many other fields we have never heard of, all the logies and everything. But essentially, Dhamma is supportive. If you work with this natural law, you try to go against it, we have problems. And the Buddha's teaching He's been teaching for 45 years. And the Buddha describes his teaching not as Buddhism. The Buddha didn't speak English. The Buddha described all his teaching as Dhamma Vinaya. And in this artistic rendition at the bottom, showing the Buddha sending off the first 60 arahats or enlightened disciples, the Buddha says, go monks on tour for the benefit of the common folk, the happiness of the common folk, out of compassion for the world, the welfare, the benefit, the happiness of gods and human beings. And this is found in the Mahavagga, which is part of the Vinaya Pitaka. Now, clearly, from the 3 points I underlined here, Dhamma Vinaya is for our benefit, for our happiness, for our welfare. So Dhamma supports us, helping us. Then why is it taught? It is out of compassion for the world. Because those people who were enlightened, they were once like us, wandering aimlessly, don't know what's going on, and seeking happiness. But they have found it by becoming enlightened. And because of that, they are sharing what they have learned, what they have accomplished with the rest of society. Okay, so remember, Dhamma Vinaya is for our benefit, for happiness, for our welfare. It is not for you to glorify the Buddha and make Buddha happy. It's not for that. Dhamma, as taught by the Buddha, is for us to use, for us to practice, for us to gain. Now, in this Dhammapada verse, the path of happiness, Dhammapada verse 275, the Buddha says, describing the path, the way to achieve happiness, walking on this path, you will make an end of suffering. Having discovered how to pull out the thorn of lust, I make known the path. And the Buddha committed 45 of his life, 45 years of his life to the spreading of this understanding. Now, the bottom picture shows on the one kneeling, talking to another venerable seated with the arms bow on the left. The one leaning is Upatissa, a lay name. Later, he ordained and became Venerable Sariputta. And who was he talking to? He was talking to Venerable Asaji, one of the first 5 ascetics the Buddha taught the first lecture, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Now, without going through the whole story, what happened was Upatissa and Kolita, who later became Venerable Moggallana, the 2 chief disciples of the Buddha when they became Buddhist monks later, what happened was they renounced the world. They were from rich families, very educated, and they enjoyed themselves so much in the various fairs and other entertainment fields, but they got disillusioned. And because of that, they renounced the world and went to study under a well-known teacher called Sanjaya. But after learning, they found out it doesn't really help me to gain happiness, permanent, everlasting happiness. So they left this teacher. And these 2, Kolita and Upatissa, decided to split up so that they can widen the search for answers. Maybe somebody has discovered the answers already. And they went out. And Upatissa was wandering along a certain town, a certain street. And of so many renunciants in India in those days, there were many people who go on pintacara, go on the alms round and looking for food and so on. Upatissa came across this person who looked somewhat also doing pintacara, but looked somewhat different from the rest of the other so-called renunciants or monastics. The others were not Buddhist monks. Then he found this person who looked very interesting. And he came up to him, and Upatissa said to Venerable Asaji, bright are your faculties, my friend, pure your complexion and clear. This is something he noticed. From afar, he doesn't know this Venerable Asaji, he saw his complexion. And that made Upatissa come towards the Venerable Asaji, and they had a conversation. In that short conversation, Venerable Asaji summarized the teaching of the Buddha in a very famous short stanza. And with that stanza, Upatissa gained the first stage of enlightenment. And later, he, as promised with Kolita, he said, after I have discovered something, I will come and look for you and share what I have found. And here, the passage here, Moggallana or Kolita, the wanderer saw Upatissa coming from afar, and on seeing him, said, bright are your faculties, my friend, pure your complexion, and clear. Could it be that you have attained the deathless? Now, you must understand, Upatissa and Kolita are childhood friends. They grew up together. So definitely, Kolita knows what Upatissa looks like. But yet, when he sees his friend after some time, hey, then he can tell his friend, bright are your faculties, my friend. That means when you get even the first stage of enlightenment, you look different. Okay, when people see you, wow, some degree of happiness and brightness is about you. And Upatissa was not fully enlightened. He wasn't an arahat yet. He had only attained the first stage of sainthood. So he asked his friend, could it be that you have attained the deathless? And Upatissa said, yes, my friend, I have attained the deathless. Just now, friend, I saw Venerable Asaji and ... He repeats the story of how he came across Venerable Asaji, and he shared with his good friend Kolita what Venerable Asaji taught him. And at the end of that, Kolita also gained the first stage of sainthood. And later, the two of them went to look for the Buddha and obtained ordination as monks. And they practiced under the Buddha for a short while. And those two, gained full enlightenment later. Okay. Now, why am I sharing this section with you? Well, clearly, when you attain even the first stage of sainthood, you look different to your friends, definitely. You feel differently also. So there's something interesting to note here. So what is this path to happiness? Well, most of us should be familiar. It is a Noble Eightfold Path. And I show the picture towards the right. It's a path. And I keep emphasizing, a path is not to be looked at and say, wow, so beautiful. This is part of a Japanese garden or Malaysian garden or whatever garden, how they arrange the steps. A path is for you it takes you from where you are standing to somewhere else. But how to get there, to that somewhere? You have to walk the path. So a path is to be used, is to be walked on, in other words, to practice, to get you to the destination of that intended path. And what is this path? It ennobles you, makes you more noble than you are right now. And they are eightfold. Not eight, not noble eight path, but eightfold, because each step on the path helps each other. It supports you. Okay, it's all 8 factors supporting each other. That's why it's called eightfold. And most of you are familiar that we have this right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These constitute the Noble Eightfold Path. And in many suttas, here this particular one I happen to quote is from the first lecture given by the Buddha, the Dhamma Cakka Pavatana Sutta. Now, moving on, how do we start the path? Sometimes, how do we get to the Dhamma? That is some of the questions we may want to ask. And in the Mangala Sutta, by the way, the word Mangala means blessing, very ong, very good fortune, good luck, some people might call it. So those who want to have a lot of good luck, please read the Mangala Sutta. And the first verse has 3 aspects, 3 blessings, which the Buddha listed. Not to fraternize with fools. Fools normally, get you into more trouble, more suffering. And here, the Buddha continues, but to fraternize or mix up with the wise and honoring those worthy of honor. This is the highest blessing. So the first starting blessing the Buddha says is, don't mix up with idiots and fools. The second advice, look out for wise people. Look for the wise people and try to mix up with them and pay respect to them. Later down in the Mangala Sutta, you have respect and humility, contentment and gratitude, but very importantly for us, timely listening to the teaching. What teaching? To the Dhamma. Okay. Timely listening, like this morning. Okay. We want to listen, to learn what is the Dhamma. Going further, the site of ascetics. Now, site of ascetics means people who have renounced the world, who are teachers, who are spiritual guides. So to be able to see spiritual guides, especially the monastics, are a blessing. And after you see them, after you've learned something from them, the emphasis now is back to the spiritual guide. Who are spiritual guides? How do we identify them? How do we interact with them? How do we check whether what they say makes sense, or are they talking nonsense, or what? Okay. Do spiritual guides have a uniform? Spiritual guide on the forehead. Cannot be, ma. You don't know. It's a man in the street. For that matter, you might come across a Buddha walking down the street. How do you know he's a Buddha? It doesn't mean he must be wearing the saffron robe. He may be from a different culture. This one, the one we know, Gautama the Buddha, came from India. They had that custom. He might come from Malaysia. Maybe he wears sarong. Okay. So it is despite. So how do we identify spiritual guides? And this list of advice from the Buddha, give us some ideas. Now, here is an interesting sutta, Jatila Sutta. Jatila describes what they call method hair ascetics. Now, some people regard, ascetics, they look different from us. They don't wear the kind of clothes we wear. So some people might say, bottom right picture, those are the wise ones, method hair ascetics. Some are naked, some are not botak, some don't bathe, and some don't cut their nails, and many kinds of funny practices in India in those days. And even today, they have some of those who are still practicing. So do we judge that these people on the bottom right picture are ascetics? Are they wise? That is some question. So one day, King Pasenadi of Kosala went up to the Buddha, bowed down and sat at one side. What happened was, in this particular sutta, it was narrated that a group of these method hair ascetics were walking slowly past the king and the Buddha. And King Pasenadi stood up, rearranged his robes, and knelt down and paid respect to these ascetics walking past. And then he asked the Buddha later, are all of these ascetics or any one of them enlightened? Okay, can they be my teacher or not? And the Buddha said this advice: it's hard for you to know who is perfected or on the path of perfection. Okay, that's the first thing. You can get to know a person's ethics or morals by living with them, but only after a long time, not casually, only when paying attention, not when inattentive, and only by the wise, not the witless. So basically, you're hanging around day and night, whether on stage or off the stage, behind the scenes, when he brushes his teeth, go to the toilet, everything, you hang around and see how the person behaves. So that means any teacher passing through to this center or any other religious center, how do we know truly this person's morals? That means the practice level. We do not know because we don't normally hang out with them. You can get to know a person's purity by dealing with them. So you have certain dealings, working with them on projects and so on, how they react and so on. Are they quick to anger? Are they come up with silly ideas or selfish ideas or what? You can get to know a person's resilience in times of trouble. So when they get misfortune in their lives, how do they react? They become hysterical, become revengeful, or what? You can get to know a person's wisdom by discussion. Now, all this, but only after a long time, not casually, only when paying attention, not when inattentive, only by the wise, not the witless. By the way, those group of ascetics that walk past these venerables, after the Buddha said this, the king admitted, actually, those ascetics walk past me. They are actually the spies, I sent them an assignment to a neighboring country to spy on the other country. They were coming back to report to me after they have shaven and cleaned up themselves. So not by looks. So it's difficult. So in life, we have many kinds of ideas coming to us. Okay, any suggestions, whether from a monastic or from a lay person, or just going out on Ananda, we go to the shop and talking to our friends, we come across many ideas. In some countries, ideas, they substitute the word ideas with called, oh, there is this theory, as if it is proven, but actually it's just an idea or opinion. So this aspect, this question was posed to the Buddha by the community of Kalamas. Kalamas came from a village, Kesaputta, and they had many of these ascetics, spiritual people walking into their village, getting alms. After that, they go to the nearby forest and do their practices. So each time these so-called ascetics come in, this group of people will ask, hey, Bhante, what can you teach us to support us, to help us? And each one of them will give their own idea, their Dhamma. But then sometimes these people will say, hey, but the other teacher say this one. How come you say, the other teacher taught A and you were teaching me Z? Then the teacher will say, no lah, that previous teacher all don't know anything, talk nonsense lah. Listen to me. So the Kalamas were very confused. So many teachers, who to listen to? So they asked the Buddha the same question. And the Buddha said, Kalamas, don't go by reports, legends, traditions, even scripture, logical conjecture, inference, by analogies, by agreement through pondering views, by probability, or by the thought. This contemplative is our teacher. Now, this statement is a very well-known statement. In some ways, I can call it famous, even in the Western world. It's called, the Kalama Sutta has got a nickname. It's called, don't believe anything. A list of 10. See, number 10, by the thought, this contemplative is our teacher. In other words, the Buddha is saying, just because the Buddha is your teacher, you are Buddhist, so Buddha must be your teacher. The Buddha is saying, don't believe. So don't believe the Buddha. But by saying don't believe, the Buddha doesn't leave you hanging. The Buddha says, how do you judge? And here the Buddha didn't start. These Kalamas have not met the Buddha before, doesn't know anything about the Four Noble Truths or the Noble Eightfold Path. So the Buddha was teaching them to use their, what today we call common sense. Use your gray matter. We are not born yesterday. We have lived a life, we have interacted, we have worked and so on. We have some degree, some level of wisdom, some understanding. So we can use that to judge certain things. So how do you judge? When you know for yourselves, and this statement is very important, when you know for yourselves that these qualities, as taught by that so and so, or this idea is unskillful, these qualities are blameworthy, these qualities are criticized by the wise, these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to harm and to suffering, then you should abandon them. Don't accept these kind of ideas, these silly ideas, they cause trouble. This is the aspect of rejection. And what do you accept? When you know for yourselves that these qualities are skillful, these qualities are blameless, these qualities are praised by the wise, these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to welfare and to happiness, then you should enter and remain in them. Now, Kalama Sutta is very useful. We can use it not in the spiritual world only, but in everyday world. And we should use this. Buddhists are not simple believers. Believe this, believe that. Just because somebody say, oh, go to this tree, you pray here, you offer here, wow, you can get a lot of riches. Buddhists are not so gullible. We ask a lot of questions. We use our common sense. Okay, so take take the lessons from the Kalama Sutta at heart. Now, by the way, Kalama Sutta not only teach this aspect of how not to believe, how to judge. The Kalama Sutta also teach you the Brahma Vihara meditations, for those who are familiar with the term Brahma Vihara, and talks about rebirth and karma also towards the end of the sutta. So do read the sutta, and this is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 3, Sutta number 65. In another sutta called the Vimamsaka Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 47. In fact, the word Vimamsa means to inquire, to ask after. And what was this sutta about? Well, the Buddha, being an enlightened person, he has no defilements. He is saying how to check up on a person who claims to be enlightened and without any faults. So here the sutta says, monks, a monk who is an inquirer, unable to comprehend another's mind. Now, unable. Unable means if a certain person cannot read, if I cannot read your mind, I do not know whether you are a good person with defilements or not. Some people in India at those days were so well developed, they could read another person's mind. So they don't need to talk so much. They analyze your mind, they know you are a pure person or impure person. They know. But the rest of us, we are not that well developed. We have to use our eyes, our ears to inquire and find out. So monks who are an inquirer, unable to comprehend another's mind, should scrutinize the Buddha. It means the Buddha is saying, you can check up on the Buddha to see whether he's fully awakened Buddha or not. Some people may have doubt. Hey, are you sure he's Buddha? He says he's a Buddha, ma. He's awakened, ma. But is he? So the Buddha invites, in this case, give advice. Invites you to check up the Buddha. So monks should scrutinize the Buddha for two things. Things that can be seen and heard. That's how we find out things. Can anything corrupt be seen or heard in the Buddha or not? And scrutinizing him, they find that nothing corrupt can be seen or heard in the Buddha. Not when the Buddha is on stage or behind stage. Okay, when he's eating his lunch or whatever, you can check up on the body, the Buddha, to see anything corrupt. They scrutinize further. Can anything mixed be seen or heard in the Buddha or not? And scrutinizing him, they find that nothing mixed can be seen or heard in the Buddha. Now, although this statement is just to scrutinize, like the other sutta, the Jatila Sutta, there were people, spies from other religions that pretend to be Buddhist monks. They hang around the Buddha. They actually spy on the Buddha for long periods of time to see if he got any exhibits, anything he say which is very stupid, which is conducive to unhappiness and suffering or not. So, and the Buddha is not worried because he knows that he is pure, no more defilements. So you can hang around and see him on stage or off stage for how many years you want, no problem. Go and see. They scrutinize him further. Can anything clean be seen or heard in the Buddha or not? And scrutinizing him, they find that clean things can be seen and heard in the Buddha. They scrutinize him further. Did the Venerable attain this skillful state a long time ago or just recently? And clearly, scrutinizing, they find that the Venerable attained this skillful state a long time ago, not just recently. Now, this page is very important. This one, here they say, they scrutinize further. Are certain things found in that venerable monk who has achieved fame and renown? For monks, so long as a monk has not achieved fame and renown, certain dangers are not found in them. But when they achieve fame and renown, those dangers appear. Scrutinizing him, they find that those dangers are not found in the Buddha who has achieved fame and renown. Now, this, among the earliest, this particular one is of interest. Many of us, we start off practicing, we are able to overcome certain defilements, or at least to some extent. And then later on, especially for Dhamma sharers, spiritual guides, monks, nuns, and so on, they become very famous, popular, well-known in YouTube, writing books, and all these kind of things. At the early stage, no defilements show up because they didn't achieve fame and renown. Later on, when people keep on coming, their audience become bigger, their congregation becomes big, because people say, wow, you're so clever, you know everything, you're walking Buddhist encyclopedia, as they used to say in Ananda. Okay, you have to watch out. The person who is practicing must ever watch out. They are stroking me, they are appealing to my ego. You are so good, so good, so good, so good. So the person will feel, "Ayo, I 好勁啊." You make your ego, your head gets swollen. So does your head get swollen? Or you know, oh, these are just words. I have to be mindful on my practice. So how do you react to fame and renown? You fall for the defilement that arise, the stroking from the audience, or you maintain your calm, your equanimity. Oh, there's orang cakap money lah, never mind. I still continue my practice. You're not affected by fame and renown. This is the aspect. And here, I veer off that Vimamsaka Sutta for a while to show you the stages of enlightenment of individuals. Now, these are called the 10 fetters or 10 defilements. And here in pink, here we have the term called Putujana, worldling, an ordinary person. And on the right is the noble one, a person who is enlightened, or at least partially enlightened. And the person who has attained the first stage of enlightenment, or stream winner, or the Pali term is called Sotapan, has uprooted, out of the 10 defilements, uprooted the first 3, that of personality belief, the I, the skeptical doubt. Skeptical doubt means especially in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and clinging to mere rules and rituals. There are some people who say, "Oi, when you pay respect to Buddha, when you hold the joystick, you must hold it this way. You must use this kind of joystick. Short one, long one, this brand, must hold this way. You must bow down this way. You must kneel, approach the Buddha this way." A lot of rules lah. So a lot of people cling to mere rules and rituals. When you have uprooted the first 3, you attain Sotapan. Then the second stage of sainthood, or second stream winner, is Sakatagami. Those who have toned down, okay, this sensuous craving and ill will. Ill will means getting angry. It means a Sotapan person can get angry, Okay, only in the attainment of the second stage, you have calmed it down to some. So anger management has progressed a great deal, but you have not uprooted aspect of ill will yet. And then when you attain Anagami, the third stage of stream winner, you have uprooted sensuous craving and ill will. So a person who is an Anagami can never get angry because there's no ill will. And then the balance 5, craving for fine material existence, craving for immaterial existence, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance are uprooted. So altogether 10. When you have uprooted all 10, you have attained the 4th. You are said to be a 4th stage of stream winner or Arahat. You are classified as a fully enlightened disciple of the Buddha. Fully enlightened. Now, notice in the list of 5 towards number 3 from the bottom, conceit or mana. Conceit is when people stroke you. Wow, you're so knowledgeable. You Achan, you're so great. For those people who have not uprooted conceit, it strokes their ego grows. Although in the Sotapan, you have got rid of personality belief, the gross version, the fine-tuned I am great, the conceit, you all don't know anything one, is still there. It's only gotten rid of when you attain Arahatship. So the first 5 defilements or first 3 stages, Sotapan, Sakadagami, and Anagami, they still have conceit. They can still be affected by people stroking them and say, "Wow, it's so king, so good, so holy." Only Arahat is not affected by this. Why am I showing you this? Where lay people like us are not able to verify that so and so, a venerable this, Achan, Sayadaw, or whatever, monastic or lay person, is enlightened or not. We are not capable to analyze the other person's mind unless we are able to read the mind. But majority of us, normal people, cannot. So there's no way of knowing whether the person is. You can only see and hear. And even then, if we associate for a long time, we get an idea. May be wrong, But the ultimate criteria is this. But how do we see? We cannot. So we must give allowance to those people who are teaching. Okay, you must give allowance. Why? Because the venerable who may be 30 years vasa, 30 years as a monk or longer, may be very knowledgeable, he's teaching us, but you must give allowance that the person may make mistakes in his behavior, his relationship to others. He might hurt other people accidentally, or during his practice. At that moment, he had a lapse of practice and he made a mistake. Later on, he regretted. He confessed. Then he continued his practice. He is still a practitioner. He is maybe further along the road only than us. We have just started or have not started. Okay, but that person is not an arahat. Okay. So continuing on the sutta, the Vimamsaka Sutta, this is the last portion. They scrutinize further. Is this venerable securely stopped or insecurely stopped? Is the reason they don't indulge in sensual pleasures that they are free of greed because greed has ended? And scrutinizing the Buddha, they find that the venerable is securely stopped. Stop means he has uprooted the 10 defilements. No more defilements in there. Securely stopped. Not insecurely stopped. The reason they don't indulge in sensual pleasures is that they are freed of greed because greed has ended. Do read the whole sutta later. Now, this sutta is interesting. Chanki Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 95. Here is a conversation between Bharavaja and the Buddha. And Bharavaja was asking the Buddha, Gautama, how do you define awakening to the truth? And the Buddha said, Bharavaja, take the case of a monk living supported by a town or village. A householder or their child approaches and scrutinizes them for 3 kinds of things. This is quite common, like for us. We walk around, you see, we want to learn some Dhamma. So we approach a person maybe wearing a saffron robe, a person who is renounced. There's an obvious sign that the person is a religious person, a spiritual person. But when we approach them, we don't simply say, this person, we can learn something from him. He might be a bogus monk, teach you nonsense. So we need to scrutinize. And the Buddha advises 3 kinds of things you need to scrutinize and check up on a potential teacher or spiritual guide. Things that arouse greed, things that provoke hate, and things that promote delusion. Okay? So does this venerable have any qualities that arouse greed? Such qualities that when their mind to be overwhelmed by them, they might say that they know even though they don't know, or that they see even though they don't see, or they might encourage others to do what is for their lasting harm and suffering. Scrutinizing them, they find this venerable has no such qualities that arouse greed. Okay. This is a layperson checking up on the reverend, by observing, by hearing, hanging around long time, this kind of things, Rather, that venerable has bodily and verbal behavior like that of someone without greed. And the principle that they teach, the teaching that they teach is deep, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, sublime, beyond the scope of logic, subtle, comprehensive to the astute or wise. It's not easy for someone with greed to teach this. Scrutinizing them in this way, they see that they are purified of qualities that arouse greed. Next, they search them for qualities that provoke hate. So they go through the whole process as in the earlier portion. Does this venerable have any qualities that provoke hate? Then scrutinizing them and so on, they find that they have no such qualities that provoke hate. So clearly, moving down further, scrutinizing them in this way, they see that they are purified of qualities that provoke hate. Next, they scrutinize them for qualities that promote delusion. So does this venerable have any qualities that promote delusion? Notice many of these sentences I have ... There's a repeat of what is mentioned in the earlier slides. So scrutinizing them in this way, they see that they are purified of qualities that promote delusion. Now here we go on a little bit about to and on, to the Dhamma path, and while you're on the Dhamma path, because the spiritual guide will show you where is the Dhamma path to get us started. And while we are walking the Dhamma path, sometimes we need clarification and encouragement and so on when we have experienced difficulties in the practice. So while we are on the path, we still need a spiritual guide. Now, in this Chunky Sutta, here, this page summarizes what the earlier pages mentioned. Scrutinizing them in this way, they see that they are purified of qualities that arouse greed, now purified of qualities that provoke hate, purified of qualities that promote delusion. And after you have verified that this venerable, the practice level is very high, at least based on what you can see, what you can hear, you still don't know whether the person is the Buddha or not, or an Arahant. You do not know, because we are not that level. So we can only check accordingly. But even at this level, next, they place faith or saddha in them. When faith has risen, they approach the teacher. Now, personally, I don't like to use the word faith. I say they place confidence in this potential teacher, because you have checked up on this person, this potential teacher, this potential spiritual guide, whether renounced or lay, this person doesn't seem to show greed, hatred, and delusion, then my confidence in this person grows. Then you approach this teacher, they pay homage. Actively listen, hear the teachings, remember the teachings, reflect on their meaning, and accept them after consideration. Now, actively listening, hear the teachings. Actively listening is not meaning sitting down, your body here, you just hear, listen. Active listening is, in other suttas, the Buddha used the term, listen with eager ears. Why? You make sure you're not distracted by all your handphone messages and noise outside, everything. You pay full attention to this teacher, absorbing everything that this teacher is teaching. Okay, trying to understand the thing. So it's not just listening to the teaching, but you hear the teachings. And the next sentence, remember the teachings. Now, you must understand, during the Buddha's time, there were no handphones, there was no paper, they don't write, not like in China, they keep on writing, but in India, no. The method of looking through the teachings, revising the teaching was to, first you listen to the teacher, you memorize, remember the teachings. You put the book, the lecture into your head. After that, doesn't mean you accept the teachings, you just remember them only. Then after that, you reflect on their meaning. You recall what you heard, you reflect on the meaning. Does it make sense? Do you understand? Maybe you want to have discussion with the teacher and so on. Only after all that, then you pass all your Kalama Sutta tests and so on. Accept them after consideration. Okay, you have not started practicing yet, you're just evaluating the teachings. Then enthusiasm springs up, because when you accept them, you say, oh, this is reasonable, rational, or now I want to practice. Then enthusiasm springs up. They make an effort, weigh up and persevere. Persevering, they directly realize the ultimate truth and see it with penetrating wisdom. So it means they put the teachings into practice and they gain wisdom because of that. So the first portion of evaluating the teacher, and after you have confidence in them, only you go to these stages. And that's how the awakening to truth is defined by Bhattacharya. I describe the awakening to truth is defined in this way. But this is not yet arrival at the truth. And so Bhattacharya asks, how do you define arrival at the truth? By the cultivation, development, and making much of these very same things, there is the arrival at the truth. So that was the initial what they call portion, and then you need to cultivate. Cultivation means is development, is living the life as part of the teachings and practicing. And after a long time only, you arrive at the truth. That means enlightenment. And the sutta continues. Now, here, two aspects of the title come to light. A spiritual guide and the Dhamma path. Now, this portion, the 4 great references. Now, it is extracted from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, Digha Nikaya Sutta number 16. Now, the Sutta DN 16, Mahaparinibbana Sutta, is very long. There are many, shall we say, sub-suttas, sub-lectures given by the Buddha to different groups of people in this. This particular portion, the Jatu Mahapadesakata, the 4 great references, is very important, more so today than previously. Why? Because the Buddha was about to pass away. So he gave this advice. Now notice the word 22 mentioned here. In this Sutta Central, it is what I call section number 22, where this aspect of 4 great references start. This is for your reference if you want to read that portion first. Now, this is how you relate. The Buddha will be no more. He will have passed away. So we rely on monks, whether very senior monks, junior monks, or whatever. What is our attitude towards monks, and how our reaction to them would be. So in this Sutta, Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha will go from this village to this village, and on his way to Kusinara, where he will pass away. So then the Buddha, together with a large sangha of monks, arrived at Boga city, where he stayed at the Ananda shrine. There the Buddha addressed the monks. Monks, I will teach you the 4 great references. Listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Then the monk said, yes, sir. The first great reference. Now take a monk who says, Reverend, I've heard and learned this in the presence of the Buddha. This is the teaching. This is the training. This is the teacher's instruction. So this monk claims that he heard it from the Buddha. And the Buddha's advice to that, in this case, even to us, you should neither approve nor dismiss that monk's statement. So even a person who has learned directly from the Buddha and now teaching us, you should neither approve nor dismiss the mendicant's statement. Instead, having carefully memorized those words and phrases, you should make sure they fit in the discourse and are exhibited in the training. It means they fit what has been recorded in the Dhamma Vinaya. Discourse means Dhamma, exhibited in the training, Vinaya. So back to the teaching. So all these 2,600 years, the teachings have been recorded down. So whenever, in this case, a person who claims, I heard it from the Buddha directly. So you listen to the teachings, but you shouldn't say, yeah, I believe you, I accept it, or I throw out the teachings. No, you counter-check. The key word is scrutinize. You counter-check what has been taught by this so-called reverend, whether it is found in the Dhamma Vinaya of the Buddha, in this case, as recorded in the Tipitaka. If they do not fit in the discourse and are not exhibited in the training, you should draw the conclusion. Clearly, this is not the word of the Buddha. It has been incorrectly memorized by the mendicant, and so you should reject it. So reject even from a monk who has heard from the Buddha. If they do fit in the discourse and are exhibited in the training, you should draw the conclusion. Clearly, this is the word of the Buddha. It has been correctly memorized by that monk. You should remember it. And this is the first great reference. So the Buddha even says, even this so-called so-and-so has heard from me, but may have heard wrongly or wrongly memorized, but counter-check whatever that this person teaches against the contents of the Tipitaka. The second great reference, take another monk who says, in such and such a monastery lives a sangha with seniors and leaders. I've heard and learned this in the presence of that sangha. This is the teaching. This is the training. This is the teacher's instruction. You should neither approve nor dismiss that monk's statement. So, as usual, you should carefully memorize those words. You should make sure they fit in the discourse and are exhibited in the training. So again, you scrutinize, you check. If they do not fit in the discourse and are not exhibited in the training, So clearly, this is not the word of the Buddha, and you should reject it. If they do fit in the discourse and are exhibited in the training, so clearly this is the word of the Buddha, and you should remember it. And this is the second great reference. The third great reference, take another monk who says, in such and such a monastery, there are several senior monks who are very learned, inheritors of the heritage, who have memorized the teachings, the monastic law and the outlines. I've heard and learned this in the presence of those senior monks. Senior monks means those monks who have been monks for many, many years and hold very important positions. And so on. That means if they do not fit in the discourse and the training, you should reject it. But if they do fit in the discourse and are exhibited in the training, draw the conclusion. Clearly, this is the word of the Buddha. You should remember it. And this is the third great reference. And the fourth, take another monk who says, in such a monastery, there is a single senior monk who is very learned and inheritor of the heritage, who has memorized the teachings, the monastic law, and the outlines. I have heard and learned this in the presence of that senior monk. Now, if they do fit in the discourse and are exhibited in the training, you should draw the conclusion. Clearly, this is the word of the Buddha, and you should remember it. This is the fourth great discourse. So the above these are the four great references. So even the Buddha advises, even though whether a large group of monks or whatever, or even from the Buddha, you have heard from the Buddha and the person teaches you, counter check. The key word is called check, check, check. And of course, from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha was even teaching. His last words were still teaching. And he taught, Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Apamadena Sampadeta. All compounded things are perishable. Strive with heedfulness. And he passed away at Kusinara between two sal trees at the age of 80 years. Now here we move on to the full spectrum. And we're talking about our relationship with spiritual guides and us, especially monastic ones. Okay, how do we relate to them? They may, the spiritual guides or monastics may be enlightened, partially enlightened, or not enlightened. But how do we relate to them? And we come back to the Sigalovada Sutta, which we have shared in Ananda before. There are 6 directions as indicated in the previous page. The zenith means above us, talking about spiritual guides and us. A gentleman should serve spiritual guides as the upper quarter in 5 ways. Okay. Now, spiritual guides, and talking about Samana Brahmana. This is a term used in this particular Sigalovada Sutta. It's a combo of 2 words, Samana and Brahmana. Here, the dictionary. Samana means a recluse, a wanderer, or samani, a nun, someone who is renounced. Brahmana, commonly people assume the word Brahmana means those of the Brahmin caste. But in this particular sutta, we are not talking about those of the Brahmin caste. We're talking about a true Brahmin, holiness supreme. It means describing the person's character. Okay, that is more important. A man leading a pure, ascetic life, often even synonymous with an arahat, an enlightened person. So, elsewhere in the Dhammapada verse, in Dhammapadas, in this case, verse 264, the Buddha describes what is a samana. Not by shaven head does a man who is indisciplined and untruthful become a samana or contemplative. How can he who is full of desire and greed be a samana? So clearly, he's describing a character of the samana. At the bottom, Dhammapada verse 265. He who wholly subdues evil, both small and great, is called a samana, because he has overcome all evil. So even samanas may have overcome all evil. What about Brahmana? Often described as holy man, a man leading a pure life. Not by matted hair, not by lineage, nor by birth does one become a holy man. Now, why? Matted hair is the way you dress. Lineage, just because your sifu is so and so, doesn't mean that you are a Brahmana. Nor by birth does one become a holy man. Birth, because in India, they have the caste system. Just because you are born in the Brahmin caste, means you're holy. Not by birth. But then the Buddha says, in this Dhammapada verse 393, he says, but he in whom truth and righteousness exist, he is pure. He is a holy man. Okay. And but at the bottom, 286, he who is meditative, stainless, settled, whose work is done, and who is free from cankers, having reached the highest goal, him do I call a holy man. Now, in this particular Dhammapada verse 383 is quite interesting. Normally, we talk about someone who is very accomplished. But this particular verse talks about a person who is still working, who is still practicing, trying to gain enlightenment. So the Buddha says, exert yourself, O Brahmana. Cut off the stream of craving and discard sense desires, knowing the destruction of all the conditioned things. Become, O holy man, the knower of the uncreated. So here, this particular verse talks of a person who is not reached full enlightenment yet, but is striving, a practitioner. So he is also still regarded as a holy man, a Brahmana. And bottom right, Dhammapada verse 384, when the holy man has reached the summit of two paths, that of concentration and insight, he knows the truth and all his fetters or defilements fall away. So he has uprooted all 10 defilements. So one who has reached graduation, he is a Brahmana. So going back to the Sigalovada Sutta, a gentleman should serve spiritual guides in the upper quarter. By how do you serve? By loving deeds of body. This is what we do. As lay people, we support how we interact with spiritual guides, especially the monastics. We serve by loving deeds of body, by loving deeds of speech, by loving deeds of mind, by not turning them away at the gate, by providing them with material needs. That is our duty as lay people when we want to support the monastics. And then spiritual guides also have duties. So spiritual guides served by a gentleman in these 5 ways should show compassion to him in these 6 ways. So the monastics who have been served by us, they keep him from doing bad. They support him in doing good. They think of him with kindly thoughts. They teach him what he does not know. They clarify what he's already learned. They explain the path to heaven. Okay, so this is the spiritual guide teaching us. Now, back to the story of, now in this case, not Upatissa, now he's already Venerable Sariputta. Sariputta pays obeisance, pay respect to his teacher. So Venerable Sariputta always remembered that he had been able to meet the Buddha and attain the deathless through Venerable Asaji. So he always paid obeisance in the direction where his teacher was, and he always went to bed with his head lying in the same direction. So other monks who were staying with him at Jetavana Monastery misinterpreted his actions and reported to the Buddha. Why? In those days in India, paying respect to the 6 directions was common Brahmanical practice. So when they say, hey, how come this monk like want to be in certain direction? So they thought that he was doing this Brahmanical practice. So later the Buddha inquired about this aspect from Venerable Sariputta. And Sariputta explained that he was only paying obeisance to his teacher, the Venerable Asaji. and that he was not worshipping the various directions. The Buddha said to the other monks, "Monks, the Venerable Sariputta was not worshipping the various directions. He was only paying obeisance to his teacher and benefactor. It is quite right and proper for him to pay homage to such a teacher." Now, respect to this, the Buddha mentioned this Dhammapada verse 392. Just as a Brahman priest reveres his sacrificial fire, even so should one devoutly revere the person from whom one has learned the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. So, regardless of the teacher, whether the teacher who taught us something, especially a monastic, the teacher taught us, whether the teacher is fully enlightened, he's an arahat or not, maybe not even an Arya, have not even attained the first stage of sainthood, not Sotapan. But if the teacher is able to teach us something which we find valuable after we consider those aspects and we benefit our life, then please go ahead and learn from the person. Okay? So whoever we mix up with, we are always scrutinizing because we don't know who is enlightened, who is not, who has defilements, who has not. We do not know. We cannot read other people's mind. We cannot access. We are so low in that level. So we scrutinize and investigate all teachers, whether monastic or lay. We take the good stuff from them. That means Dhamma from them. They can support us. We reject that which is not Dhamma. Okay, we reject that which is not Dhamma and leave it alone. So we can just still benefit. We don't put all our eggs in one basket and be as if the basket drops, all the eggs get cracked. We are not affected by that. That's the key point. We take what is good because we scrutinize. We know what is Dhamma. We can evaluate accordingly.